Hello and welcome back to The Big Stage, brought to you by bettingexpert.com, where we run through the 10 Premier League matches of the weekend and hopefully present you some top predictions and the best bets. Now, joining me today is the one and only Ben Dinnery from premierinjuries.com. Now, Ben, I know you've just had a relaunch of the website, so just give us a quick update how that's been going and what can we see on the website coming soon.
Yeah, hi, Joe, thanks for that. So the new website launched earlier this week. Hopefully, it's the version 2 of Premier Injuries, synonymous obviously with that injury table. But now we're looking to give a little bit more context in and around those injuries. We always talk about return to play, but now it's about return to performance. So what that actually means in terms of players being back on the pitch and when we can maybe expect players to, return to their pre-injury levels. Lots of development, fingers crossed. It's went pretty smoothly so far, so I'll touch a little bit of wood there. And yeah, this will be an evolving website. We will be continuously developing, and it's a bit of a soft launch at the moment with a big bang coming in the summer.
Now, of course, premierinjuries.com are great resources for bettors because, if you know the players are out or not back to their peak performance, then maybe you don't bet on that team. Now, just to run through the show today, we're not going to be joined by Dan Jenkins and Rory Jennings. They're occupied, but we do have Ben on hand to deliver some injury news and some top advice along the way. Now, we are going to feature some key matches as well as get to some quick fire predictions, and let's see what the team make of those. But now we're going to kick off with the first look at the key fixture, which will be Brentford against Watford on Friday night. So the battle of the Bees against the Hornets on a Friday night sees Brentford host Watford. Brentford will go into this one as the bookies' favourites. They've got a track record on Friday night, of course, winning that opening game against Arsenal. But Ben, can you just give us a quick injury update on both sides? Who's going to be out and who are the key men that we should be looking out for in this match?
Yeah, massive issues for both sides. For the Bees, Brentford, Christoph Ayer at the back, he's out, and also Zanka, Matthias Jorgensen, there's question marks with regards to him. So there could be a slight reshuffle in that back line. And we also have Canos suspended, of course. He's been brilliant this season for Brentford. He picked up his 5th caution of the campaign. Elsewhere, it's pretty much as you were with those long-term absentees. And it's a similar situation down at Watford, potentially up to 9 players missing out. But we have seen one player back on the training pitches this week, and that was Ken Sema. He's back with the group. He's recovering from a medial collateral knee ligament problem, so he could be in and around the fringes of that matchday squad.
Now, looking at Watford as well, the goals they have been conceding, I mean, they have been pretty poor since Ranieri took over, I think it's fair to say. Of course, they did get a great result against Man United, but, I mean, that back line for you, how kind of bad has it been, really? And is it down to Ranieri's tactics or simply the players they've had missing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of context. Yeah, I mean, overall, since Ranieri took over, I think XG conceded, there's not a great deal of difference between Brentford and Watford. And I think that's largely due in part by the absence of maybe Kabasele, hamstring problems, Serralta, they've all picked, and Kulo, they've all picked up injuries. So that's caused a bit of a reshuffle in that Watford backline. But they've also played some big teams as well. They've played a lot of the so-called Big Six. So their fixture schedule has been tough. But certainly the strengths of Watford lie further up the pitch. And these are the games that they will be targeting for 3 points.
Now, also looking ahead kind of longer term, I mean, Brentford, we have called them out a little bit on this show, potential relegation candidates. But if you look at the track record of the teams that have 17 points at this stage in the season, only 7 have actually gone down. So, I mean, history is on Brentford's side. It looks like they should be staying up, but maybe the form books can be overturned. And, maybe that joy that they had against Arsenal, let's say from the early season, has that kind of waned off a little bit? Have teams found them out, do you think?
I'm not so much as they've found out. Maybe they've regressed a little bit to the norm. We know, teams coming up from the Championship, they tend to have that, that wave of enthusiasm. Everything's new, and they perform maybe above what you would their normal expectations. So they have regressed a little bit. You also need to consider the fact that they're working with the lowest budget, one of the smallest squads. They have picked up a couple of injuries, so that has had an impact as well. But although results haven't necessarily been going their way, underlying data has been fairly positive, and they've been maybe unfortunate on occasions not to walk away with 3 points. Case in point, Newcastle at St James's Park, goals disallowed, hitting the woodwork. So they've been like I say, a little bit unlucky on occasions.
Now, I mean, if you actually look at Brentford, they've had the fewest direct attacks in the league as well. So not great in terms of going forward and getting goals. But we have highlighted that Watford's defence maybe can be got at as well. Of course, a big miss for Brentford will be Ivan Toney. So can you talk about maybe just the impact that him being ruled out will have on this game?
Yeah, of course, he's the main man, Ivan Toney. He come back with a big fanfare. He scored lots of goals in the second tier and in the Championship last season. He's maybe disappointed, certainly from a fantasy perspective on occasions this season. We think he should do a little bit more, but he was ruled out on the eve of last weekend's game due to COVID, so the chances are he could miss this game and the next. Now that means Brian Mbeumo is going to be leading that attack, probably in a 3-5-2, and Thomas Frank may look to put Jonas Wissa up there alongside him. Now, Wissa himself has only recently come back from an ankle problem, so whether he's 100% match fit, there's question marks with regards to that. So that does blunt that Brentford attack somewhat.
Yeah, and then going on the other side, the Watford attack. I mean, for me, I'm picking Dennis in my fantasy team this week. I think he could do well in terms of leading the line. He's in a bit of form as well. But how do you see the forward line shaping up for Watford, given some kind of injury worries, potentially Sarr being out, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, Emmanuel Dennis is the main man. I think in terms of fantasy assets, there's only one striker who's scored more points. And in terms of goal involvements, I think only Mo Salah has more in the Premier League this season. You touched upon it before, the absence of Ismail Sarr. Now, he would normally be deployed on the right-hand side of a 4-5-1. With Dennis on the left. But now that Sarr's out, probably until early 2022, it means that Dennis has switched flanks. And I think he prefers playing off that left-hand side a little bit more. But with João Pedro or possibly even Cuco Hernandez coming on the left, it means that Dennis will switch over to the right with Josh King leading that front line.
That's it. Now, I mean, how much I wanted to touch on Josh King as well. How much do you rate him as potentially a fantasy asset and also potentially just goal scorer in this game?
Yeah, I've got a lot of love for Josh King. He's a player that's went under the radar, and from to score the hat-trick that he did at Goodison Park against Everton, of course, he had a little bit of a point to prove there. But for me, that came as no surprise. The only real surprise for me is that he sort of hovered around in the wilderness for just such a while. From his Bournemouth days, he attracted a lot of suitors, and then he went off the boil. But now, he seems to be performing well in a Watford team. You're going to get a lot of love from Claudio Ranieri. He responds well to that, and like I say, I really do like that Watford front line.
Now, speaking of attacking prowess, I feel like this game could be going a high-scoring affair. So just to bring up Dan Jenkins' top bet for this match, it is going to be over 2.5 goals. Now, I'm supporting that. I feel like, with Watford, they're basically not keeping many clean sheets these days. Trouble at the back as well. Brentford should be able to get on the score sheet. I'm actually going for a Brentford win in this one myself. But Ben, you're going in a different direction a little bit with your prediction for this game.
I am, and my predictions this week will, as you will see, seem to follow the same course of thought. And I think it could be quite a cagey affair. Neither side will want to lose this one. So I'm sitting on the fence and I'm going 1-1.
Going for a low-scoring game in that one, but hopefully we have some entertainment on the Friday night. All right, now we're going to move on to some quick-fire games. We're going to kind of fire through these, give you some of Dan Jenkins' top bets from the betting expert community, and now we're going to look at Man City Wolves, the early kickoff on Saturday. So, of course, City flying high at the top of the table, now gone actually clear ahead of Liverpool and Chelsea, of course. Wolves did okay, I feel like, against Liverpool last time out, of course, losing out to that Divock Origi goal late on. But just give us your thoughts, Ben. How do you feel like this game will shape up?
I can't really see anything other than a Manchester City win. Wolves done okay last week, but I think it was more about just trying to limit Liverpool as opposed to maybe going out there and attacking and trying to win that game. I haven't been overly enamoured by Bruno Lage and Wolves generally this season. I think they've been a little bit fortunate, maybe overperformed across some of their attacking metrics, which has give that sort of false sense that he's doing a good job, and that league position for me is a little bit false. So I think they'll struggle. City on their day are able to get a result against anyone. The only slight reservation or concern that I may have is as always with Pep Guardiola, is rotation. We're coming off the back of that Champions League tie. We've also have another round of Premier League fixtures coming up. So that may see, Pep utilise the strength and depth of his squad. Although we do know, effectively he does have two very strong starting 11s.
Yeah, well, the top bet for this one is actually on the both teams to score market and no. So basically expecting either team to keep a clean sheet. I think you mentioned there Wolves is kind of, bit of smoke and mirrors a little bit with their form. They've actually only scored 1 goal in 5 games, although they did manage to get 5 points out of those 5 games, interestingly enough. I don't think they're going to have enough here to score against City, so I agree. I feel like City will keep a clean sheet. I think, Ben, you're going down the similar route, right?
I'm in agreement with you, Joe. I'm going for 2-0 City.
Yeah, and also just a note on City as well. They've actually only averaged 1.4 goals at home since those 5-0 wins against Arsenal and Chelsea. So, yeah, just keep that in mind. They're not firing as much as they have been in the past at the Etihad. So a close affair for us. Right, let's move on to Arsenal and Southampton next up on the 3 o'clock kickoff, of course. Now, Arsenal again go into this one as the heavy favourites. And again, we're looking at the both teams to score market. And again, it's going to be no from Dan's selection. So basically either team to keep a clean sheet. Ben, how are you thinking on this one?
I actually do fancy both teams to score. I'm not a huge fan of Arsenal. Again, I think Mikel Arteta's doing an okay job. They've maybe been fortunate on occasions, but there's a very soft centre to that side, and that was exposed by Everton on Monday night. Yes, the return of Granit Xhaka is a bonus, but it just smacks of a little bit of desperation for me, how you have a midfielder who's been sidelined for over 2 months with quite a serious knee problem, had minimal amount of minutes on the training pitches, and he's thrown straight back in there. Now, that to me doesn't smack of a team that's full of confidence and thinking that they're going to go out there for him to change that team. So, like I say, I'm not entirely, the jury's very much still out with Mikel Arteta, and he needs to start delivering. Otherwise, there's going to be question marks, whether he's the man for the job.
Yeah, I think there's also some goalkeeper worries, right, at Southampton, one to be aware of in terms of injuries. Can you just give us an update on that?
There certainly is. Now, we know that Ralph Hasenhüttl was extremely unhappy, to say the least, with Alex McCarthy last weekend. The hamstring problem had been hampering him during the second half, failed to notify the manager. That obviously impeded him quite a bit for the equalising goal. Now, he's going to be ruled out now for around about 3 to 4 weeks. Fraser Forster, backup, he missed out last weekend with a muscle problem, and he hasn't been able to recover. So in comes Willy Caballero, 40-year-old goalkeeper, formerly of Chelsea. And Ralph Hasenhüttl is sporting, and it looks as if he's going to come straight in to that starting 11 for Saints.
Yeah, so with that, potential frailty in goal, I feel like Arsenal should be able to dominate this one. So I'm going to back them to keep a clean sheet. So I'm, in agreement with Dan on this one. And actually, you have to go back to 1987 for the last time that Southampton won away at Arsenal. So I don't expect much in terms of Southampton. But yeah, Ben's going for a 2-1 win. For them, I'm going for a 1-0 for Arsenal. All right, let's move on to Chelsea against Leeds, a really interesting encounter at Stamford Bridge. Again, you have to go back to 1999 for the last time that Leeds actually won away here against Chelsea. So the bookies look like it's going to go one way, but Dan Jenkins is actually going to give Leeds a bit of credit, and he's going for Leeds plus 1.5 goals on the Asian handicap. But Ben, how do you see this one going, given some of the injury worries that Leeds have?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good shout there. By down 1.5 goals is a pretty decent amount, to kick things off, especially given Chelsea's recent downform and their tendency to concede goals. I think it's 6 in the last 2 games, all competitions. Massive problems, particularly in his centre midfield. We know N'Golo Kante is out. Mateo Kovacic also out. Jorginho managing an ongoing hip stroke back problem. And there's also a slight issue there with Ruben Loftus-Cheek. And that forced Thomas Tuchel into a slight formational change with Reece James in the centre of the park in the Champions League. So that's one to watch. However, Leeds themselves are always, they've also got massive concerns. 3 big players all ruled out of this game and maybe for the remainder of the year. The big one being Calvin Phillips. That's a hamstring issue. We have Liam Cooper, which will force a reshuffle in that back line. And Patrick Bamford, fresh from an ankle injury that kept him out for almost 2.5 months, comes off the bench, scores a 94th minute equaliser. Any celebration, suffers a setback, hamstring, and we're looking at several weeks out on the sidelines once again.
Nightmare. I mean, for me, I'm looking at Chelsea to actually dominate this game. I feel like they will be too strong, given those injury worries for Leeds as well. And also, Patrick Bamford being a big miss, I feel like. Also, a fun fact about Mason Mount, if he does get on the score sheet Actually, 3 of the last 4 times he has scored, Chelsea have covered those handicap lines and also to nil. So I'm backing Mason Mount to actually get on the score sheet. So I'm going to back a 3-1 win for Chelsea. Hopefully Mount does score. All right, well, now we're going to move on to our next in-focus game, and it sees the return of Steven Gerrard to Liverpool. So, of course, Steven Gerrard taking his in-form Aston Villa side to Anfield to take on Liverpool. It's going to be an interesting reception. I'm pretty sure we're in agreement, Ben, that he is going to get a bit of a hero's welcome, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's worshipped, on Merseyside, or particularly at Anfield in Liverpool. So, they'll do all the pre-game celebrations. They'll honour Steven Gerrard. But once, they cross that white line and the whistle goes, Liverpool... it's full steam ahead. For me, probably one of the best attacking teams in Europe. They certainly have the best attacking front line in the Premier League at this moment. I can't see anything other than a solid 3 points for the Reds.
Now, as much as it pains me to say as a Villa fan, I'm in agreement. I feel like Liverpool should win this one pretty comfortably. But let's talk about what kind of impact Gerrard has had. I feel like he's kind of instilled some confidence and some belief into these Villa players. But have you seen anything else in terms of a tactical point of view, what he's actually changed?
Yeah, certainly on the training pitches, intensities levels by his own admission has been raised, and there's a lot of competition in there for places. We've seen Steven Gerrard adopt inherently what would be a 4-3-3 during his initial time in charge, and that's been a slight move away from Dean Smith's either a 4-2-3-1 or even a 5-3-2 when he tried to shoehorn in maybe Danny Ings and Ollie Watkins. Now, ultimately, that 4-3-3 formation has been determined by player availability. However, I do expect that that to continue in the very near future. Defensively, Villa have improved massively. They had a really soft centre, particularly from set pieces, but that's improved, and that's something that Steven Gerrard came in, identified, and has addressed during these early game weeks in charge.
I think, you raised the interesting point there about Danny Ings. So just give us a quick update on the injury status. Do you think he'll feature at Anfield, or is it a bit too soon?
It would obviously great to come back to one of his old clubs, feel as if he has a point to prove. If he is in and around that match day squad, and I think he does have a very good chance, that it would be from the bench, in my opinion. We know he's been managing a niggling hamstring problem. And you also look at, last weekend's result and the form of Ollie Watkins playing centrally. If you bring Danny Ings into that team, that does, like I say, ask a few questions and probably moves Ollie Watkins maybe out to the left-hand side. And then you're questioning, is it Buendia or is it Ramsey going in on the right? So for me, Danny Ings possibly from the bench.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. If I had the choice, then I'd definitely be starting Ollie Watkins. I feel like he is basically the best player we've had so far this season. I think he's really stood out, especially under Gerrard as well. Among other players, they've also lifted their game. We've talked about off air. John McGinn lifted his game tremendously since Gerrard came in. So I'm trying to big up Villa here, but let's talk about Liverpool. How do you stop that team?
That's the big question. Ultimately, Wolves done an admirable job of trying to limit their chances. But when you look at some of their world class options at their disposal. Mo Salah, Diego Jota is in absolutely fantastic form. Sadio Mane, and then you throw in Andy Robertson, who's improved of late. Trent, Jordan Henderson probably doesn't get the praise that sometimes he deserves. Thiago Alcantara coming into a little bit of form since his return from niggling calf problems and injuries. They've got strength, they've got quality, they've got class all around the pitch, and what you need to hope for is several of those players to have a major off day, and then you to be on your game, and hopefully with a slice of luck, and you may come away with something.
Now, the intuition would be that if players are playing regularly, then maybe fatigue could set in. Mo Salah's not been dropped yet. Sadio Mane's been playing midweek as well. But let's talk about those players. They seem to thrive on the action, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a question that's levied fairly often, particularly midweek in what was ultimately a Champions League dead rubber. Why risk starting the likes of Sadio Mane and Mo Salah when they could suffer a setback and have potential, ramifications for the Premier League? But, to give it context, these players perform better when they have high a number of load in their legs. They're some of the anomalies. You think of the Lionel Messi's, the Cristiano Ronaldo's, those players who are in peak condition, optimum levels. They play week in and week out and they keep on delivering. And Sadio Mane and Mo Salah are exactly that. In terms of their availability rates, they've demonstrated that they can play week in, week out, 2-3 games at optimum levels. They're robust. They can tolerate the demands. So, there's no question that they can go out and they can do the job. They're just, pristine athletes being able to consistently deliver high level of performances.
And that's it. I mean, didn't you have in your data set as well, maybe that injury occurrence actually increases when they've been rested? Is that something you mentioned before?
Yeah, this is something that was flagged up in terms of particularly Sadio Mane. When they've been dropped and when they've suffered a drop in minutes, it's when those players are returning back to their optimal levels. That's when they tend to pick up those soft tissues and muscular problems. And these are, things that the clubs will be aware of internally. So that's why they're managed. You have some players that you need to ease back, but others that you need to keep on pushing, and they need to constantly be playing on the threshold, on the edge to get the best out of them.
It's incredible, really. I mean, just watching on as an amateur footballer, it's just unbelievable to see how much, first of all, distance they cover, the sprints they make, and then just consistently doing it at that highest level. It's incredible. But let's move on to our prediction for the game. We are expecting goals in this one, and Dan is going for over 3, and I'm in full agreement with that. Unfortunately, I feel like Liverpool will win. They'll beat Villa, but I do expect Villa to get on the score sheet as well. So I'm going for a 4-1 Liverpool win. But Ben, which way do you see it going?
I'm seeing it a little bit tighter. Like I say, I think Steven Gerrard will have his team pumped up for this one. And I'll have one eye on that midweek game as well, and maybe Klopp just easing players back in the second half, maybe when that game's dead and buried, as it were. But I'm going 2-0 home win Liverpool.
And speaking of rotation as well, sorry, just to move on to that, like the Champions League, he brought in a lot of the youngsters, or a few of the youngsters as well. I mean, how impressed were you by them? And do you think they can step up then to perform on the big stage of the Premier League?
Look, it's one thing playing in the Champions League, which is a big enough stage, and it's another playing in the Premier League. It's a unique beast in terms of, you mentioned the distance covered, high intensity sprints, the environment, the energy. So what I would say in terms of their development team, they've got some really exciting prospects. And when you're training day in and day out with the likes of your Mo Salahs, your Firminos, your Jotas, your Manes, then it cannot help but improve your game. And certainly the future for Liverpool looks bright. It's whether these players will get an opportunity to play regularly in that Liverpool start 11, because inherently, there's a good nucleus of 7, 8, 9 players who are almost in there week in and week out every Premier League round.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move on then to some more quick fire predictions. That wraps up our assessment of Liverpool against Villa. So the next game we're going to talk about is Norwich against Man United. Now, it looks like the new manager bounce is over for Dean Smith. As Dan Jenkins duly predicted, it would come to an end quite quickly. They got their first defeat against Spurs last time out. But here the prediction is looking at under 3 goals. So I don't know, just for you, Ben, how impressed have you been by Rangnick and the impact that he's made on Man United so far?
Yeah, still very, very early days. I don't think you can look too much into that first result. He barely had a full session under the belt, so maybe credit to Michael Carrick, for the way he had his players ready and prepared for that game. But certainly there's been a lift around the club. There'll be players in that squad now who've been handed an opportunity, and they'll want to go out and grab those shirts and make it their own. I'm thinking predominantly the two fullbacks in Diogo Dalot and also Alex Telles. They come in for Alex Wan-Bissaka and also Luke Shaw. So and we've also seen the emergence of Fred, often lambasted for his time down at Old Trafford, but he's a guy that's really sort of stepped up, and he's had 3 goal involvements in the last 2 games. And the Brazilian, like I say, is bubbling under the radar a little bit. And he could be one to watch.
Our prediction here is for under 3 goals, but which way do you see it going? Do you think United will just be too strong for Norwich and score a lot of goals in the meantime?
Yeah, we've seen a change of formation from Dean Smith against Tottenham, and I think they will need to tweak that again. Otherwise, Manchester United will capitalise on it. They made 11 changes in the Champions League midweek, so that would seem to suggest that we could revert back to that 11 that started last weekend. And Cristiano Ronaldo, it's a player that's been earmarked by Ranieri in terms of his physicality, how fit he is and how lean and how much of an athlete he is. And he could really go out and do a job at Carrow Road. And I'm disagreeing with Dan on this one, unfortunately. I see goals in it. I think United will go out, go for the jugular, get it done early, but I can't see them keeping a clean sheet. So I'm going United 3-1.
All right, I'm going for a similar scoreline, but I'm going for United to win by 2 goals, but also Norwich not to score, sorry. So I'm going for 2-0 United. So I'm in agreement with Dan on this one. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk about Burnley and West Ham next. So here, the bet is actually for Burnley plus half a goal. Dan is just going to be consistently backing Burnley. He said he likes the look of their fixtures. So for you as well, Ben, almost talking from a fantasy point of view, how important do you think it is to look ahead maybe 3 or 4 game weeks in advance when you're kind of planning or trying to make these predictions?
It's a consideration, but I'll give you 2 examples just of this week where, sometimes it's some of the best laid plans, just tend to go out the window. You take a look at the situation with Tottenham Hotspur and also Leicester City. Several players now ruled out during the COVID. We're also in the season of the suspension when a lot of players are approaching that 5 yellow card mark. So that rules them out for a game. And also just in terms of injury incidents, typically around this period, we would see an increase of around about 50% in terms of time loss injuries. Although, as it currently stands over the first sort of few days of this month, we're seeing massive numbers. So, look, I think to be aware in terms of planning and looking at those fixtures. But now, with the tight turnaround in the schedule and heavy rotation from clubs and player availability, I think sometimes you need to stick with what you know, and you can't look too far ahead because it just proves an impossible task to try and predict anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, well, sticking to the plan, it seems like West Ham are doing that really well, even though we've maybe questioned their squad depth in the past. Of course, winning against Chelsea last time out, incredible result for them. I'm backing them to get a result here against Burnley. I can't see anything other than a West Ham win. But how do you see it going up at Turf Moor?
Yeah, of course, at the time of recording, we still have a Europa League game to come. We would expect David Moyes to utilise the strength and depth of his squad, probably include a few of those development players. I've actually went 1-1 here. If pushed for a result, I would certainly edge towards West Ham. Burnley aren't the defensive unit that we always once knew and considered under Sean Dyche. I think they've conceded 1.5 goals per game on average this season, and Turf Moor, like I say, isn't as resolute a defensive hold that it once was. For West Ham, Mikel Antonio arguably grabs most of the headlines, and probably deservedly so. But I do like Jared Bowen. He's got a lot of goal involvements, and since game week 5 and 6, in terms of fantasy prospect, he's outscored Mikel Antonio almost by 2-1.
Yeah, he did impress very much so against Chelsea. I thought he took his goal really well. So yeah, definitely one to look out for the future, I think. And also, I mean, for the present, he's in such great form. All right, well, let's move on to Leicester against Newcastle next. Now, Ben, I feel like you can talk a lot about Newcastle at the moment. So which way do you see this one going? Of course, Newcastle will go into this one not really fancied by the bookies, but give us your take.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Leicester, and these are not the Geordie's rose-tinted glasses taking this into perspective. They've been very inconsistent this season. I've struggled to see if Brendan Rodgers knows really what his strongest 11 is and how to set those teams up. We'll see what happens in the Europa League. Now, what we do know at this moment in time, there are several players sidelined either through illness and or COVID. Brendan Rodgers wouldn't sort of divulge which is which, and that could impact potentially on this starting 11 at the weekend, or indeed if that game was to even go ahead if they have any more positive cases. So, what the data would suggest, Jamie Vardy should be in a very good chance of getting a goal. I think he's probably in the top 4 of the highest ranked players this weekend, particularly in a fantasy perspective. But what it doesn't do, those numbers, it doesn't give any context, particularly the arrival of Eddie Howe. And on the back of our first clean sheet and first win of the season last weekend. Although, of course, we have had that little bit of a bounce in terms of performance and in attack, but defensively, we still haven't been great.
Yeah, I feel like that could be where the frailties lie. Newcastle still haven't won away from home. And yeah, let's talk a little bit about Jamie Vardy as well. I mean, I've had him in my fantasy team. Disappointedly, didn't score against Southampton, and then was a cameo appearance against Villa. So, I mean, do you have any reason as to why maybe he was dropped? Was he looking ahead to the Europa League, Rodgers, or just trying to give him some or spare him some minutes?
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty is, and Rodgers tends to go with one up top. He has went with 2 on occasions, and you have 3 players vying for those pitch positions in Jamie Vardy, Kelechi Iheanacho, and also Patson Daka. So 3 into 1 doesn't go. And also, we're talking about Jamie Vardy, who is in the twilight years of his career. And he didn't risk him for that 3rd game in a week for fear of any kind of setback. So yes, he would have had maybe one eye on the Europa League, whether Jamie Vardy starts or not. But of course, it was on the back of that 3rd game weekend. And why take any unnecessary risk? Because he's such a pivotal player to the way the Foxes play that, any kind of setback, given the games are all in close proximity, could keep him out for several matches.
Absolutely. Now, I feel like we kind of downplayed the attacking prowess of both sides here, but Dan's bet is actually over 3 goals, and maybe you can get our reaction to that. I'm not in agreement. I feel like it should be under, and I think, Ben, you're going a similar route.
I am. And I'm actually looking at my predictions and I've realized that I've put a 1-1 across a lot of those. So I am sitting on the fence here. The concerns, can Newcastle keep a clean sheet? I'm not so sure. I would like to see, Federico Fernandez in that backline, maybe alongside Lascelles and not Fabian Sarr. But for the moment, at least, Eddie Howe seems to be stuck on Shaw. But with Callum Wilson up front, supported by the rejuvenated, maybe Joe Linton, he's getting a lot of love from Eddie Howe and Jason Tyndall. So he's responded well with a couple of performances. And then, of course, in behind and supporting the likes of Joe Willock, Alan San-Maxim, Miguel Almiron if he starts, and also John Joe Shelby, who can pick a pass. I think we're always going to be a threat going forward.
All right, but still, we're going for a low-scoring affair on this one, at least us two. Yeah. Anyway, but let's move on then to Crystal Palace against Everton, our next feature game. Everton got that great win, of course, against Arsenal, coming back from behind. Plenty of VAR involved as well in that one. They will go into this one as the underdogs, although basically you have to go back to 1994 for the last time that Palace actually beat Everton at home, funnily enough. So here, the bet from Dan Jenkins is actually for Palace to win. But Ben, how do you see this one going?
I went for a share of the spoils again, Joe. Ones each, unfortunately. I cannot really separate the 2 teams. I have been impressed with Palace this season, particularly as I wasn't expecting great things from Patrick Vieira. It took a little bit of time to transition, but they have impressed. I think some of the standout candidates this season, Conor Gallagher, Michael Owisi, coming back from that long-term injury, has impressed from the bench. Christian Benteke looks rejuvenated. Maybe that's the pressure from Edouard from the bench that's caused him to raise his game. But we have seen a couple of disappointing results in recent times. And also, again, they're a little bit susceptible to the set piece, particularly in the defence. There's been a lot of change in and around there. So we wait to see if Joachim Andersen comes back into that backline, because he's been a big miss. For Everton, of course, Rafa been under massive amounts of pressure, but they come from behind victory against Arsenal on Monday night. That would have done their confidence no world of good. So hopefully they'll be looking to build upon that. I think that the win is too much of a push. So like I say, I'm going for a share of the spoils, and it'll be a 1-1 again from me.
Now, of course, with that 1-1 prediction, you don't always have to bet on the draw. You could also look at both teams to score, like we're doing in other bets as well. Total goals under 2.5 could also be a value bet. If you're not 100% sure on which way a game will go, there are plenty of other different betting markets you can look at. All right, we're now going to move on to the final in-focus game of the game week, which will be Brighton against Tottenham. But what we want to talk about as well, a little bit more in focus, is just the impact of Antonio Conte. So Ben, can you tell us a little bit more about the impact he's made so far and how impressed you've been by him?
Yeah, so by his own admission, Antonio Conte, after 3 to 4 weeks in charge, said he's had his eyes opened a little bit into the enormity of the task. But what we've seen in his short time and involved, if we look at those first 11 game weeks when he came in, Tottenham were underperforming a lot of their metrics, expected goals, goals conceded, clean sheets expected. They're all underperforming, but the very small data set since he's come in, we've seen an improvement, and Tottenham have actually moved forward and progressed against those metrics. And one of the big things as well, what I noticed across those first 11 game weeks, Tottenham were only winning around about 57% of their tackles in the game, and that put them in the bottom 5 for the Premier League overall. Now, since Conte's come back, that's increased now to 67%, and that puts them actually second, only behind, I think, maybe Chelsea in terms of tackle won. So that may be some indication that Conte has got his teams pumped up. They're fighting, they're working harder to win that ball back, and then transition through the phases, and hopefully, take teams and move on to the front foot.
That's it. Of course, like as Dan Jenkins has highlighted in previous shows, it could be that new manager bounce effect. Like players want to go out, maybe impress a little bit more, go out and win those tackles, put a little bit more on the line potentially to win it. One stat I did want to highlight as well is just the possession stats of Spurs. So in their win against Norwich and also win against Brentford, they've just had around 40% or 50% possession. So not great in terms of, you'd think Spurs maybe should be a little bit better at keeping the ball. But maybe if you're getting a result, should we even look at possession stats, really, if they are getting the victories, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, when Leicester won the Premier League way back in, was it 2015-16, possibly, they were a side that played on the counter-attack possession. They for the majority of the games, they were in the minority. It's what you do with the ball. It's the quality. It's all well and good having possession, but it's the penetration. It's what you actually do to put the opposition under pressure. It's what you're creating. So, look, I think these stats are okay in isolation to maybe give you a little bit of insight. But like I say, you should never just take it on face value, and you should understand that the wider picture and the implications of those.
Yeah, I mean, would you put Spurs down as a counter-attacking side like Leicester were back then, or does Conte play a different style of football?
I think it's a different style of football because you don't have the personnel maybe to implement those, that kind of maybe football and philosophy as Ranieri did at Leicester. You don't have that explosive, quick turn of dynamic pace of a Jamie Vardy. Harry Kane's not going to give you that. But we've certainly seen a change. We've seen the likes of Ben Davies come into that team. From obscurity, really. Sergio Reguilon pushing up on the left-hand side. We've also seen a slight shift in maybe how Heung-min Son has been deployed. There was two, ways that possibly Conte could have set up when he came to Tottenham. One was maybe in a 3-4-3, or one alternative, he was maybe a 3-5-2 as he had done in Italy. For me, the 3-5-2 certainly benefits the like of Heung-min Son up there alongside Harry Kane. In the 3-4-3, we do see Tottenham playing a little bit wider, coming a little bit deeper. Maybe that's leaving Harry Kane a little bit more isolated. And certainly in terms of maybe, look, we know that Heung-min Son is getting attacking returns, but the chances that he's getting are a lot more difficult. And whether he can continue to return, those high and hard chances, it's maybe a little bit unsustainable.
Well, and also speaking of potentially unsustainable, I mean, Harry Kane's position in the team, like the goal scoring record is just woeful at the moment, only contributing to 6% of Spurs' goals this season. So it's just awful. I mean, what do you do with Harry Kane? Do you start dropping him or just change the system to match him? What would you do?
I mean, it's a big shout to even talk about, considering dropping Harry Kane. And the question is then, if you're thinking about taking Harry Kane out, who do you bring in? The obvious option might be Heung-min Son through the middle. But then who's going in on your left-hand side? You have Steven Bergwijn. I mean, Dele Alli. None of these players are necessarily pulling up trees. They've had opportunities in that Europa Conference to go out and show Antonio Conte, what they can do, that they deserve a place or at least a chance in that start 11 in the Premier League. But we've seen against Mura, when they went down 2-1, that nobody at this point in time is really pressuring the likes of Harry Kane to come in and try and take that sort of centre-forward role away from him.
No, absolutely. So, so there's no one else really that can go in and step into those shoes. So, let's just move on to Brighton. I feel like it's worth highlighting Neal Maupay and the late heroics that he's done the last couple of weeks. I mean, how much confidence do you think Brighton will take from those late goals and going into this game against Spurs?
Look, it's going to be massive. It shows a camaraderie. It shows that never sort of, we're not going to stop until that final whistle blows. And Graham Potter's talked about it's a really tight-knit group. And those late goals, you might only be walking away with a point, but in essence, it feels like a win in terms of confidence. And you can also go out into the next game and you think, well, it's never over. It's never over until that, the fat lady sings. So, Brighton will push and they will go to the end. And Neal Maupay, he's a bit of an anomaly. He's very streaky. As Brighton are, we've seen earlier in the season, there was a lot of suggestion that this could be their year. They were overperforming a lot of their metrics. They have regressed back a little bit. To me, I'm not fully bought into Graham Potter and Brentford being this all singing and all dancing teams that can't push. I think they will regress to the mean. And I see a team that's, maybe slightly down on mid-table, maybe 12th to 14th.
So, Ben, this is the part of the programme where we would go into our prediction for Brighton against Spurs, but unfortunately the game has now been called off, so we can't do that. All right, let's just give you a quick overview of all of the predictions from Dan Jenkins for this game week. Plenty to get stuck involved, or plenty to play with the advice from Dan. Hopefully we'll get you some winning bets as well. Also keep an eye on Ben's track record because he is winning our tipping competition here on the big stage. So great work for you, Ben. And also just a good shout out to premierinjuries.com. Best of luck for the site launch.
Thank you, Joe.
And that wraps it up for this edition of The Big Stage. Of course, please do gamble responsibly if you're going to follow any of the advice on today's show. We'll be back again very soon. We can't cover the midweek fixtures, but we'll be back again next week for more advice here on The Big Stage.